Some people will look at they use the term hell on earth, and that comes from they thinking that what we go through on this earth is our punishment. We're being punished now, but after death, then heaven will be our home. Hell on earth, that's what they call it. One person, he believed that. He believed what we went through on this earth was our punishment. That was the hell that we were what we were going through. But after death, everything will be okay. So there's a lot of different thoughts on it. Some don't believe in it, period, and on it goes. Well, here's some headlines from churches. You have your sign outside, and folks will put a sign up and little sayings on it. Here's what some had to say about it. There is no fire and brimstone here, no Bible thumping, just practical, witty messages. That's on the marquee. Another, you won't hear a lot of preaching about sin, damnation, and hellfire. Again, just keep it all positive. And we don't use the H word in our church. That could be heaven too, Not just hell, that could be heaven also. But their meaning was, you come here, it's going to be nothing but positive preaching, positive teaching, and you'll never hear anything about hell. So, if the Lord didn't want us to know anything about it, then why did He tell us a lot about it? 7 times more in the Bible, New Testament, you find more about hell than you do about heaven. 7 times. 7 times He begins trying to warn us more so than what He tells us about heaven. Well, here's some of the 3. There's more views in this, but these are some of the 3 views when it comes to hell. You have an outright denial. And this will be among individuals that would make the claim they believe in God. I'm not talking about atheists. Atheists wouldn't believe in hell, certainly. But you have those who outright deny it. When you die, they say it's all over. The soul is destroyed as well. At the time of death, no soul will survive death. Therefore, you have no punishment. Therefore, you have no reward either. So you have some just outright deny really a hell or even a heaven to some degree. But they still believe in God. You have a conditionalist. If you lived an unrighteous life, at death you will cease to exist. But if you live the righteous life, then heaven will be your home. It's just how you go about living your life. Unrighteous, at death, well, hell is your home. A righteous life, well, heaven. Might question that one as to how much righteousness does one have to live? How much unrighteousness does one have to do? Where do you draw the line at? I don't know where that would be, but that's where they teach. Then you have annihilation. You do suffer for a period of time. Once you die, you are going to suffer in hell, but eventually God will say, that's enough, and you'll be annihilated. You no longer will exist, period. And there are those that go about it and teach that from that view. So according to the sins you have in your life, well, then you suffer for a while, then you just cease to exist. It's over. But one thing these 3 have in common, they don't teach a ongoing, eternal, everlasting, never-ending punishment. They don't teach that. Either it doesn't happen or it happens for a little while with nothing eternal, everlasting, forever going to take place. And that'd be all right if that were true. Because nobody wants to go through an eternity of suffering and how the Scriptures depict hell to be. And if you got to go through a little bit, at least you have hope knowing that it's going to end. So that would be, if you're lost, you're lost, but I won't have to suffer for this eternity. Eventually, it'll end. But scripturally, what we find, it will not end. So those are some of the three of the more popular views. But here's one objection, the main one that you'll hear a lot from an eternal hell. A loving God will never punish one for all eternity due to sin. A loving God will never do that. And they compare it to a parent. Your child gets in trouble, does something wrong, and you discipline your child. And that discipline, if it's a paddling or with a belt or a switch, you don't just continue to whip that child on and on and on and on. You have a limit, and whatever the limit is, then you hope the child changes, and the child may do something else. Well, then, again, you do something else. So that's where they come across thinking that it will not be an eternal punishment. It will not be eternal. So how could God punish somebody for one mistake? How could he do that? How could he punish them for all eternity, for one mistake, one sin? And that's their argument that they come across like that. So they will be punished for a while, determined on what they did, and then maybe after years, I don't know how many years it would be, then that person would be released from hell, and then they could go to heaven. And that's where they look at it. On the flip side, what if God said, I'm going to give you heaven based on how much righteousness you do? And after a while, it's going to end. Well, the same principle is good for one, is good for the other. If I'm going to be suffering hell for what I've done, and eventually I'll be released, how much goodness does one have to do in order for that to take, or for heaven to have heaven? It can go both ways. So if heaven was limited to an amount of time, depending on how much good we did, how long would we be there? One is just as eternal as the other. Hell is just as eternal as heaven is eternal. And the Bible brings that out, and we'll look at that in a moment. What we fail to realize when it comes to this objection here to eternal hell, it's just how God views sin. That's what we fail to realize, how terrible it is. We don't always look at sin as being terrible, but God does. How bad is it? It's bad enough that he would send his son to this earth to die for us, to die so that we could get forgiveness of it. That's how bad it is. And that's the problem that we have in a scope of things. We just don't see the value of sin, what it means to God. And God, he certainly hates sin. And look what it cost his son to come and do. When it comes to hell, do we have more of a fear of God, or do we have more of a fear of man? Because Matthew 10:28, and do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. We have fear of others. That's why we lock our doors. That's why we have security systems. That's why we arm ourselves, carry weapons and such as that, because of a fear of someone else, what they might do to us. Well, they can't destroy the soul. What about our fear of God, who has that ability? And destroy here does not mean to annihilate, but what about the fear we should have for God? He has that power. If we would have the same respect for God as we would have for those criminals out there who want to destroy, it might change our mind quite a bit as to our thoughts on heaven and our thoughts on hell. So we should have a greater fear. And Christ is saying that here. We should have a greater fear of God than we do that of man. Another verse is Matthew 25:41. Several things he tells us in this verse about hell. Then he will also say to those on the left hand, "Depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels." At least 5 things he tells us about hell right here. The first one, he says that it was not prepared for mankind. It was prepared for the devil and his angels, not for man. The devils rebelled, or the angels rebelled, and of course out of heaven, and they followed that of Satan. Well, that's why hell was prepared. It was for their punishment. But if we're going to reject God, it's going to be our punishment as well. But God didn't, in the beginning, He didn't have this plan. I'm going to create hell here. I'm going to punish mankind. Here it was for that of the devil and his angels. That's why it was created. Second thing we see in this verse, it is everlasting. Into everlasting fire. It will never end. There's no calendar in hell. There's no watch in hell. There's nothing to look forward to. You know, things that happen to us in this life, in most cases, there's going to be an end of some sort to it. No matter how bad it is, there will be an end. But everlasting means everlasting. It just never ends. And it's hard, again, for us to get that into our thought, even from heaven. It's hard for us to imagine everlasting from a heavenly standpoint. But that's going to be good. If I can't grasp it from a heaven standpoint, that's okay. But I need to grasp it from an eternal, everlasting fire standpoint. It never ends. If you think of the worst pain you ever had, and it never ending. And we can't think that way because generally we take medications or surgery or something like that, and the pain is taken care of. But not when it comes to our punishment in hell. It will never end. A third thing here is a place of fire, everlasting fire. There's going to be the torture. And I don't know of anyone who takes pleasure in being burned. And again, there are those that we know personally that have been burned pretty severely. And if you've ever been in a burn unit, you know that's a very terrible, terrible place to be in. And yet, that feeling, hey, we burn our tongue, eat something hot, drink something hot, and that sort of gets us a little bit upset. But you think of a flame that never ends here, of the worst you could realize. And being burned is this terrible, terrible pain. So that is going to be with fire. That's how it's going to happen. Fourth, we see there's no departure. There's a departure from God. He's not going to be there. He says, "Depart from me." That means away from God. So from that standpoint, we'll no longer be in the presence of God. We can no longer, no matter how much you cry out to Him, He's not going to hear. It's over. There's no hope there, no hope of ever getting out. If God were to say, hell is going to be 1 billion years, you would have some hope. Every day, you would say, I'm one day closer to getting out of this. I'm one day closer to getting out of it. But there is no getting out. It's everlasting. And the fifth thing we get from this verse, it's going to be God who's going to do the sentencing. God is the one that's going to say, depart from me. He doesn't leave it up to us. He doesn't leave it up to an angel. God is going to make that final call. That's what He's going to do. And I'm glad He's doing that. Because I don't know if I personally could. I could send somebody to an everlasting place of torment, no matter what they've done. I don't know. But God's going to do the right thing. He knows what to do. And He's never left it into the hands of His servants, being what we find in the Bible, or being to us to make that call as who will spend in eternity. He makes that call. He just tells us to get out here and teach. Here's what will happen if one is not right with God when they pass on from this life. That's what we are to do, teach that and show that. But God makes that final call. So there's at least 5 things we can see there in Matthew 25. In Revelation 20 verse 10, it says, the devil who deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and false prophet are, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Of course, being in Revelation, a lot of symbolism here, but he's getting the point across that there's going to be suffering. The devil's going to be there. It's going to be a lake of fire and brimstone. We understand that part from the standpoint of being heat and just pain, tormented day and night, never ends, forever and ever. You know, we need to look at these verses and realize this torment's never going to end. And yet, when you hear people joke about it, and they use the word hell in their vocabulary, they'll tell some person to go there in a curse word, or you hear maybe somebody will say, well, I'll see you in hell. That's what they're saying, tough guy, you know. They have never thought about this. They think they're tough, and they handle it. No problem for them. Some people think it's going to be a party scene. We're going to party down there with the devil. How can you get that? You get it from not going to the Scriptures, where you get it from. So to hear somebody use it in a joking way, the word, you know they just have not considered what it's all about. What it is that's awaiting if there's not repentance in their life. So again, another verse, Revelation 20 and verse 10. Never ends. It's everlasting. In Mark 8 and verse 38, whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him the Son of Man also will be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. We can't be ashamed of Christ, and we can't be ashamed of his words, and that's why we're talking about it this morning. We're not ashamed of it. And hell is a topic that Christ talked about. That's his words, so we can't be ashamed of it. He taught people about it. He warned people about it. And so do we do so. And if you have some of these individuals or churches that shy away from it because of they don't want to offend anybody, they don't want to be negative, well, they're doing the very thing here Christ said don't do. Don't be ashamed of him or his words. Many people aren't ashamed of Christ. They'd be glad to tell you about Christ. But when it comes to his teachings, his word, they shy away from it. Oh, that's too controversial. That causes division. Christ, he knows that. He knows it's controversial. He knows it causes division. He also knows that it's got to be shared in the right way. People have got to be told. And the reason that he wants his word shared, John 12:48, he who rejects me and does not receive my words has that which judges him. The word that I have spoken will judge him in the last day. We're going to be judged by his words. Did we take them serious? Did we follow his word? Did we follow something else out there? Well, we're going to be judged according to the book that we all own, that we own several of. We're going to be judged according to the words in that book. And there's no excuse if we were to Lay it down. No excuse. It's all going to be upon us. Our responsibility to learn it. If you were to ask individuals, some of them, what motivated you to become a Christian, many of them are going to say, I didn't want to go to hell. And that's a good motivator. A very good motivator. God uses fear as a motivator. And if you're a Christian, why did you become a Christian? Was it the fear of hell? Was it another motivator that's out there? Reward? That's a motivator. Love is a motivator. Well, look what motivated Noah in Hebrews 11, verse 7. By faith, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. Noah, why did you build that ark? Fear motivated him to build that ark. He didn't want to drown. Fear is a good motivator. When we learn about hell, it motivates us. I want to go somewhere else besides there. And you get to looking, you realize there's only one or two places, heaven or hell, and therefore that's my motivator. But hopefully what happens of those who became Christians because of fear of hell, as they mature, as they grow, that maturity fear turns into love. I begin thinking more about God, what He's done for me, why He prepared a place for me in heaven. And I love Him more and more. The fear part sort of subsides because we're looking more at God. It's still there. The fear is still there. But we begin to focus on the reward and the love. That becomes our best motivator that we have. How often do you think about heaven? As a Christian, hopefully we think about it quite a bit. How often do we think about hell? Well, it should be there as well. But because of our being right with God, we should want to be right with God, a faithful life, heaven should be on our mind more than hell. So here's a thought right here. If the living knew what the dead know, there wouldn't be an empty seat in the church building. If the living knew what the dead know, there wouldn't be an empty seat on either side of this. If the living knew what the dead who are saved know or in paradise right now, there wouldn't be an empty seat. But at the same time, if the living knew what the dead who are lost know, there wouldn't be an empty seat either. God or Christ, they have given us in the Scriptures a little peek, just a little peek. Crack the door open a little bit to let us see what it's like in hell. Same thing was, I say true of heaven or paradise. The only thing we know what Paul had to say about it in 2 Corinthians 12. He said you can't put it in words. That's how great it is. But when it comes to hell, Christ did put it in words and gave us a little bitty peek. And Luke 16 is where this is found. The rich man and Lazarus. And let's just read it, and then we're through. Class will be over. But he gives us a little peek, and that's what he wants us to understand. Luke 16, verse 20. There was a certain beggar named Lazarus, full of sores, who was laid at his gate, desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, dogs came and licked his sores. And it was that the beggar died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom, and a rich man also died and was buried. And being in torments in Hades, He lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham afar off and Lazarus in his bosom. Then he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things, but now he is comforted and you are tormented. And besides all this, between us and you there's a great gulf fixed, so that those who want to pass from here to you cannot, nor can those from there pass to us. Then he said, I beg you therefore, Father, that you will send him to my father's house. For I have 5 brothers, that he may testify to them, lest they also come to this place of torment. Abraham said to him, They have Moses and the prophets. Let them hear them. And he said, No, Father Abraham, but if one goes to them from the dead, they will repent. But he said to him, If they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rise from the dead. So there's a little sneak peek. God lets it look and see what it's about. He doesn't want us to go, not to hell. He wants us to be with him in heaven. And yet Christ has given us these warnings. And we need to take them serious and live accordingly. Live a life that would be pleasing to God and avoid such a place. And Jesus said a lot more, but that's what we covered here in 30 minutes. He had a lot more to say about it, but that's enough to stir up our thought process and remembrance, a little bit of what the Scriptures have to say about it. Any comment on it? Yes. Degrees. Yeah. No. There'd be a lesser degree of punishment. For those who have trampled underfoot the unfaithful Christian, he's going to have it pretty rough. I don't know if he'd be up at the top of Satan. And there's verses on that. I'm not just making this up. There's plenty of verses on it. I guess we could cover that next week. That'd be a pretty good topic. Degrees of punishment. All right, you got next week's topic. Look it up. Degrees of punishment.